Brazil becomes a top destination for digital nomads with new visa and growing remote work community.
And this is so true. Brazil is probably one of the best countries for foreigners right now. The weather, the people, the lifestyle, the relatively low cost of living compared to many Western countries. And if you've been thinking about moving here, you've probably realized one thing. Everyone online seems to give completely different advice. So what are the actual ways to move to Brazil? Which ones are the easiest and which ones are realistic? And what does the process actually look like in real life? Let's find out. Hey guys, Beth here. If you're thinking about moving to Brazil, there are actually several different ways to do it. You've probably heard about the Digital Nomad Visa, but that's only one option. So in this video, I'll break down some of the most popular ways people legally enter, stay, and eventually move to Brazil. We'll cover the Digital Nomad Visa, the eVisa, residency through marriage, and finally the student visa, which is actually the route I personally used when I first came to Brazil. But here what makes this video different. Instead of just reading government websites to you, I asked people who actually went through these processes to share what really happened. The good, the bad, the bureaucracy, the mistakes, and the little details nobody tells you until you're already halfway through your application. Hopefully this saves you hours of confusing research and maybe even a few gray hairs. Now before we start, just a quick disclaimer, I'm not an immigration lawyer and this video is not a legal advice. I'm simply sharing my own experience, the experiences of my friends who went through these processes, and the official information that was available when this video was recorded. Immigration rules change, requirements change. Every case is different. So before applying, always double check everything with the official Brazilian government website, your local Brazilian consulate, or a qualified immigration professional. Now, let's start with probably the visa you've heard about the most, Digital Nomad Visa. So if you're a freelancer working for a company abroad or earn your income from clients outside Brazil, this is probably the first visa people will recommend. My friend Abby had just received his Brazilian Digital Nomad Visa when he recorded this. So here is what his experience looked like.
Hey everyone, my name's Abby. I got my Brazilian Nomad Visa yesterday. I'm going to share a little more about my experience going through the process. For some context, I'm a Canadian citizen living in New York on an H-1B visa, so I was able to apply from the US. I would say I started the process about a month ago to book an appointment. Like usually the appointments are like 3 or 4 weeks out for the Digital Nomad Visa. But once you have the appointment, they give you the visa the same day. Like my visa took 45 minutes. I was literally sitting there and they gave me the visa. Of the document collections, most of the documents I was able to collect within a couple of days, like, letter from your employer. Even airline tickets, you don't need it. You can just show like an statement of intent of the date you want to travel. And there's, a whole list of documents. I'll talk about the documents that are the most important. So firstly, in the employer document, they gave me feedback that it should say clearly from the employer that I'm allowed to work remotely. So that was one key. And the hardest document out of all, especially if you're applying from the US, is the FBI clearance. Being a non-US citizen in the US, you cannot send your fingerprints electronically. If you're a US citizen, you just go to the post office, electronically send your fingerprints, and within a week, actually no, less than a week, 2 or 3 days, you get the results back. But for non-US citizens, you have to go to like a fingerprint provider who takes the fingerprint, and then you have to mail those fingerprints to the FBI, and that process takes 2 weeks. And the thing is, you have to upload all the documents to the system before you can book an appointment. So I was really concerned that before I get my FBI document, I can't book an appointment. So everything is going to get delayed by 2 or 3 weeks until I'm waiting on the FBI document. But I emailed the consulate in New York, who by the way are very helpful, very responsive. Just email your consulate. They told me just submit all your documents, write a statement saying why you don't have the FBI document, and maybe they'll book you an appointment. And that's exactly what they did. So I submitted everything else except the FBI document, got my appointment. I think I submitted all of this on May 20th, got my appointment for 11th of June, which was yesterday. And within this time, I got my FBI document. I sent it over email to them. I was able to go to the appointment yesterday and pretty much had no problems. The only other thing they asked me yesterday on the spot was a work employment contract, which is different from a letter that says you're employed. That was the only additional thing I had to provide on the spot. And yeah, apart from that, once I got my visa, they did inform me something very important, which is I need to have my birth certificate and the FBI certificate apostilled So that is something I wish I started earlier, because you can get your documents apostilled before even going to your appointment. So I didn't know that, and I just found out now, and I travel to Brazil in 3 weeks from now. So I'm in a little bit of a time crunch to make sure. I was born in India, so getting my birth certificate apostilled in India, getting the FBI certificate apostilled here. And also, since I've lived in Canada for the last 5 years, they did require me to submit a Canadian police clearance. Even though they didn't say anything about getting that apostilled, just for security, I am gonna get that apostilled, which I have to do in Canada. So any police clearances you have or your birth certificate, try to get it apostilled as soon as possible. Don't wait until you get the visa. At the consulate, they did tell me that you should have these documents in place because they could ask you in immigration. But most likely what's gonna happen is when you go to register at the Polícia Federal after you arrive, which you have to do within the first 90 days. That's how also you get your Brazilian ID card. That's when you have to have these apostilled documents, and you have to have them translated.
So that's what the Digital Nomad Visa looks like in real life. And honestly, I think Abby's experience is much more useful than another generic article listing requirements, because it shows something important. The appointment itself usually isn't this stressful part. In Abby's case, the visa was approved in around 45 minutes. That's the easy part. The stressful part is everything that happens before you sit down at the consulate. So like collecting documents, making sure every paper is correct, booking appointments, waiting for background checks, wondering whether you forgot something. And trust me, Brazilian bureaucracy loves missing documents. Now, one thing I also liked about Abby's story, don't be afraid to contact the consulate directly. People often imagine immigration system as these huge robotic machines where nobody answers questions, but sometimes if you politely explain your situation, the consulate can actually be surprisingly helpful. And if real stories like Abby's are more useful than another AI-generated article, or at least copied from a government website, consider subscribing. Because I make honest videos about living in Brazil and not just getting here. Getting the visa is only the beginning. Now, not everybody watching this wants to move immediately. Some people just want to spend a few months in Brazil first, see if they actually like living here. Maybe work remotely for a while, maybe explore a few different cities. If you're from the United States, Canada, or Australia, your first step might actually be much simpler. Let's talk about the eVisa. Now, this is important. The eVisa is not residency, it's not a digital nomad visa, and it's not a long-term immigration solution. It's simply a visitor visa. My friend Rod recently went through the eVisa process himself, so here is how it looked.
Alright, so this is my email confirming my eVisa for Brazil, and the way to get this if you're American, Australian, or Canadian is to go to this website, brazil.fvsevisa.com, and then you can just click over here, whatever country you're from, then you can log in and then go through it. And then basically it took me around 4 to 5 days to get my approval, and that was very fast. I was really happy with this situation and how easy it was. I had to pay $80 US, so I know it's kind of strange, but basically if you do this, you get the visa for 10 years. So you're allowed to stay in the country up to 90 days at a time, and then you have to leave up to 180 days per year, but not together. So that's just something you have to do if you're from one of these countries. So it is what it is, but it's really easy. Just got to do it, and then you have the visa for 10 years.
This isn't residency, it's still a visitor visa, but that doesn't make it less valuable. And honestly, testing Brazil before committing to a long-term move is probably one of the smartest things you can do, because Instagram shows beaches, YouTube shows sunsets, but real life also includes bureaucracy, bank accounts, finding apartments, learning Portuguese, and yes, sometimes getting robbed. After more than 5 years living in Rio, I was robbed for the very first time. I made an entire video about exactly what happened, what I did afterwards, and what I do differently today. Not to scare you, but because you're planning to move here, I think you deserve to see the full picture. Now let's move to something completely different. If you're building a genuine life together with a Brazilian partner, one of the strongest long-term options is residency through marriage, or through união estável, which is Brazil's legally recognized stable union, like civil marriage. Now, I know there are a million videos online saying just marry Brazilian and you're done, but the reality is it's a bit more complicated. So instead of explaining everything myself, I asked my friend Julia to share her experience. Here's her story.
Первый шаг – это, конечно, заключить брак с бразильцем. Для заключения брака нужны документы, паспорт, как обычно, свидетельство о рождении с апостилем и переведенное на португальский, и всякие разные справки о несудимости. И на саму церемонию нас попросили привести 2 свидетелей. И там очень важно знать португальский хотя бы на базовом уровне, хотя бы чтобы люди в Карторио поняли, что ты вообще понимаешь, что происходит, иначе не будут заключать брак и попросят перевести переводчику. Дальше, сразу после заключения брака, я получила ВНЖ. ВНЖ дают на 9 лет. И с даты, вот, которая написана на ВНЖ, нужно прожить в Бразилии 1 год. И после этого уже можно будет подаваться на гражданство. И вот пока вы живете этот 1 год, можно уже сразу позаботиться о том, чтобы получить документы о подтверждении того, что вы знаете португальский. Это может быть либо CLP-BRAS, мне кажется, такой самый распространенный вариант, либо это могут быть какие-то курсы, аккредитованные там Министерством образования, которые тоже подходят для получения гражданства. Но я сдавала CLP-BRAS, мне показалось, это такой самый простой вариант. Тем более, что сам экзамен мне показался достаточно простым. Там не было никаких тестов ни на грамматику, ни на лексику. Чисто вот там несколько письменных упражнений, там аудирование и устная часть. Дальше, когда у вас уже будет на руках подтверждение того, что вы знаете португальский, нужно будет еще подтверждение проживания. Это может быть либо контракт, либо счета за газ, за интернет. Уже можно подавать заявление на гражданство, это тоже делается онлайн. И вот это начинается такой самый долгий процесс, который может идти там от полугода до 1,5 лет примерно. Сначала все ваши документы проверяет полиция, потом, когда полиция проверила, что все правильно, там они еще делают какой-то, не знаю, бэкграунд-чек. Потом эти документы проверяет Министерство юстиции. И вот это все длится где-то, наверное, около года. Вот у меня, кстати, было так, что полиция приняла все документы, а уже на этапе, когда они ушли в Министерство юстиции, мне мою заявку вернули. Я это все проверяла на сайте, статус моего кейса. И мне сказали, что мне не хватает одного документа. Но, слава богу, мне сказали, что просто дошлите этот документ, и как бы все будет окей. Это была, по-моему, декларация о том, что мы действительно в браке. То есть я и муж должны были подписать, что как бы да, мы действительно в браке. Окей, как бы слава богу, что не развернули, потому что я знаю кейсы, что вот именно на гражданство разворачивают просто без объяснения причин, приходится весь процесс заново начинать, поэтому там нужно прям очень внимательно относиться к перепроверять все документы. И вот потом уже, когда приняли все мои документы, тебя приглашают на снятие отпечатков пальцев в полицию. И потом уже после снятия отпечатков пальцев ходят портари, нужно смотреть на сайте, искать по имени и фамилии. И уже с этой портари можно записываться на получение уже самой вот карточки, самого документа, где уже будет написано, что вы гражданин Бразилии.
Yeah, that's basically immigration on hard mode. But despite all of that, this is still one of the strongest long-term paths if you genuinely build in your life in Brazil. And finally, the route I personally used when I first came to Brazil, the student visa. This is where my own story with Brazil actually began. When people hear student visa, they usually imagine spending 4 years at a university, but that's not always the case. The student visa gives you something incredibly valuable. Time to learn Portuguese. Time to understand how Brazil actually works, time to experience everyday life instead of just vacation life. Now, the exact requirements depend on the course, the school, and the Brazilian consulate handling your application. But generally, the process looks something like this. First, you enroll in an eligible educational program. That could be a university, an exchange program, research, or certain language courses. The institution then provides the documents needed for your application. You apply for the visa, arrive in Brazil, and complete your registration with Polícia Federal. Pretty straightforward. And by the way, if you're looking for a Portuguese school, I can genuinely recommend Fala, Portuguese for foreigners. That's where I studied, and one of the things I really like about them is that they have campuses in several Brazilian cities, including Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, and Florianópolis. So if you eventually decide to move to another city, there is a good chance you can continue studying there. Now, this video is not sponsored, but I leave a link in the description so you guys can check them out. I genuinely recommend them. And now learning Portuguese actually gave me the opportunity to explore different parts of Brazil, different cities, different cultures, different lifestyles. And trust me, Brazil changes dramatically depending on where you are. Rio feels different from São Paulo. São Paulo feels different from Florianópolis. And Ilha Grande, well, that's something else entirely. I actually made an entire documentary about Ilha Grande, an island that went from pirate attacks to quarantine to one of Brazil's most notorious prisons, and eventually became one of the country's most beautiful destinations. I'll leave that video right here. Thanks for watching, like this video, follow for more, and see you in the next one.